Imagine scoring a D. How does that make you feel? Horrible, right? Well, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave the United States a D plus on the state of the electrical infrastructure in the U.S. So, what's the big deal about that? Well, the older the grid gets, it's more likely to fail. It's more susceptible to cyber attacks and more susceptible to weather events like we saw in Texas earlier in February. It simply was not able to handle it. So, don't worry too much. There are solutions, but it is of serious concern because we are susceptible to a major blackout event that could shut down the United States entirely. If it were to happen, the United States were shut down entirely. Uh, we would lose all commerce in about a month. Ultimately, it would just fall to pieces. Um, we lose the ability to get fuel, so we lose the ability to use generators because if you can't pump gas, can't fuel a generator, so that's not a reliable backup option. Nuclear plants would have to shut down. We would basically dig a hole that would take us much longer to get out of. And a lot of the U.S. senators do believe that. If that were to happen, then 90% of the U.S. population would die in 1 year. So this is a serious concern. Um, so, you talk about cyber attacks, and in Ukraine, that was where the most notable cyber attack on electrical grid happened. And the Russian government actually managed to hack in through phishing emails, basically an email that allows them access to their computer. They went into this worker's computer and just shut the electrical grid off and blocked them off from any access through a back door. They gave from a code that was delivered through an email for Russian government. So that's one thing we can do to prevent that is training. As Theodore J. Curry, he studies out of the University of Florida. He's a professor there. He suggests training, obviously, on fishing and watering holes. Watering holes are websites um, that basically take your information as soon as you log on to them. And yeah, and then his other proposal is self-healing grids, or what's known as microgrids. And basically, microgrids, whenever you have a circuit, and it goes out, there's a fault, somebody hacks into the substation, they can isolate around it and basically isolate it out of the integrated system and have the power rerouted around it, and so it'll prevent major blackouts from happening in an area and will allow for the restoration of power in that area, and then we can move on from there and reroute the power back and restore it. So that basically that helps cut out major areas, and also you can isolate cyber attacks. It gets hacked. You can isolate the microgrid. They only have access to that one area. It's out until we can get it fixed. Some other solutions or other things that would definitely help is to move to green energy. Green energy works on a distributed system. So basically, if you have, let's say, a set of windmills 500 miles to the left and 500 miles to the right, a weather storm hits the one on the right, the one on the left can pick up the slack until they can get the one on the right restored, which is different from our traditional method of fossil fuel energy, because fossil fuel energy, if the power knocks it out, as we've seen with Hurricane Matthews in New York, it completely shuts it down and will shut down everything that one fossil fuel generator feeds. So it'll just make the system stronger by spreading out to help against major weather events. Another thing that's worth mentioning is Veritone AI. Veritone is a company that invented the first AI processing system, self-automated AI processing system, and they're now incorporating that into electrical devices. So it'll just help things run at maximum efficiency. The self-healing grids, it can make those more of a reality because now you don't have to hire people to do it. They can self-do it. The grid can detect a fault on its own, automatically isolate itself out. So that's another big front. Another thing we need to do is close the socioeconomic gap, which is something the Biden administration is currently working on. They're offering loans for. They're giving out loans to these private companies in order to incentivize infrastructure gain, and they make a little profit off of it too. So that's definitely a positive. There's 22 new transmission line projects set to start, which is a super help because that's one of the oldest parts of our infrastructure. So ultimately, in conclusion, I don't think there's one solution. I think all these solutions work together, and then we can strengthen our grid. And I think the future looks a whole lot brighter, literally.